Hi, I'm Eitan, and last month I traveled 6,000 miles from my home in New York to the startup capital of the world to meet some of the most interesting startup founders. You're about to meet Tuvia Elbaum, who started 3 successful companies simply because he had an idea and believed he could make it a reality. He's raised hundreds of thousands of dollars on Kickstarter and millions from venture capitalists. I traveled halfway across the world to speak with him for 3 hours, where he distilled timeless life advice that we were able to cut down to just over 30 minutes. Enjoy. Hey everyone, this is Tuvia Elbaum. He is a serial entrepreneur who was the CEO and founder of 3 different companies. He likes to stay at his companies for quite a while, shake things up, change up an industry, and then start something else. So for our first question, I'm going to ask you a little bit about your childhood, how you got into this whole entrepreneurial game. Was there anything that was imbued into you that helped you end up founding 3 companies that successfully?
Yeah, okay, so obviously growing up in Israel. Israel nowadays is a startup nation. It was just starting to be the startup nation when we were growing up. It definitely wasn't yet. Always into entrepreneurship. When you grow up in Jewish communities, there's always like these different entrepreneurial gigs that you do, especially around the holidays. Mm-hmm. People are always selling stuff. Sukkot, you sell the forminim, right?
The forminim, right.
Right. And so you climb the ranks of that with the years, right? As a high schooler here in Israel especially. And then different things like that throughout high school. And obviously growing up in the 90s meant 2 things. First of all, internet taking off. And seeing it as a high schooler, knowing that's where the future is going to be. So taking computers in high school, knowing that I want to be in that industry. But also being in the 90s in Jerusalem and Israel wasn't an easy time. If you were like from the politics aspect and everything, unfortunately, a lot of terror attacks. Mm-hmm. So you grew up with a very, especially compared to today's world, but a very mature mindset, understanding that life is fragile.
Wow.
It sounds a little harsh, but it's not like that. But when you attend too many funerals by the age of 20, it puts life in perspective. So that's definitely a drive, I'd say for me, but for many people I know, that you have a day, you got to seize that day. Nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So you don't hold back. You take the risk, you take the bet, and you try to, in the end of the day, again, part of our belief as being, part of my belief of being an Orthodox Jew is trying to make the world a better place. So you put all these things together, internet, taking advantage of what you have, taking advantage of the life you have, and wanting to make the world better is like, that's the mixture you end up with. So yeah, awesome. That's all from there basically, I guess you could say. A little heavy for the first question.
Yeah, that was pretty deep. We're like a minute into this. What inspired you to create TextAway, and why did you decide to go to college after founding your first startup? I think that's an interesting way to do it, though.
Right. So back then, this is 2006. So the top phone in the market was a flip phone from Nokia. That was like the number 1 phone in the market. And being I think 21, 22 at the time, I noticed that we were texting more and more and more. Text messages only began a few years earlier, like in 97, 98, if I'm not mistaken. But we were already texting all the time. It was a lot easier, more comfortable to text than to call. And the idea was in 2006 was, okay, we have all these phone calls we have to make for work, or not even work, but these orders we have to make, why not turn them into text messaging instead of making that annoying phone call? So the number 1 thing was, for example, ordering a cab. Getting a cab, right? So if you have the ability, instead of, again, back then you had to pick up your phone and call the cab company, the taxi company, and have them get one to you, and so on. So instead of doing that, why not text a number with your address, and then through a system, find the closest driver to you through the GPS system in the cabs, and send you the cab automatically. Mm-hmm. And then at the time also there was what we call the WAP system. WAP internet was the internet on the mobile phones back then. Mm-hmm. So have through that system send you back a link, also in a text message, a link to a map where the cab driver is at the moment.
Wow. So very similar to Uber.
Basically what Uber is with an app, but just before apps and just through text messaging. So that was the idea in 2006. We started it in Jerusalem, in Israel. many lessons to be learned from that one. But basically, being too early to a market and not being in the right place is as crucial as they say. Like being in the right place in the right time is like ABCs for any project,
starting.
anything you're doing. So yeah, so that's basically what happened with that. It didn't take off.
Okay.
After a year and a half of doing cab drivers, that didn't work.
How'd you do it? Did you interview? Did you like call up cold
So
call?
yeah, so when you look at the Uber playbook, Travis Kalanick, having his experience after going through everything he went through, his entrepreneurial journey, 15 years of starting Red Swish, and being sued before Red Swish, being sued by Hollywood, what he went through with his first company. Being the type of entrepreneur he wasn't afraid of fighting the regulators and fighting the cab companies and basically the medallion industry. Mm-hmm. And that's what allowed him to just start Uber first as Uber Taxi, as black cars, but then later on he turned it into an actual taxi company, and he wasn't worried from the government. He wasn't afraid from the regulators. Being in Israel, being a young entrepreneur, knowing nothing, and like wanting to start the system, the first thing everyone kept on telling us was, you're going to have to get a medallion. You're going to have to get a license because you're basically operating at a cab company.
Right.
And we're like, oh no, we're not going to start fighting with everybody. So we had to go through the cab companies. So basically that was problem number one and where the problems began. But that's basically how we tried to start, was through the different cab companies, using their systems. But again, it didn't work out.
And a follow-up question is, in the entrepreneurial world, giving up is often like frowned upon. It's like, wow, you quit your startup, like you're a failure. Like, what gave you the courage to say, this isn't working, let me pivot to something else?
It's one of the toughest questions, because especially in the climate we are today, with the fundraising environment and the startup world going through the recession for the past year and a half, everything that's going on, it's the toughest question you have to ask yourself as an entrepreneur. Is it working or is it not working? And you really have to be truthful with yourself, but you always have to look for the objectives outside and the indicators in the market. So it was a great idea, because we knew people were texting all the time. We knew people wanted to text more than pick up their phone. If we could give them the better experience than making that phone call, we knew it was going to be used. But on the other hand, from the business perspective, going through the cab companies, they were just not being part of it. They were just terrible partners. The cab drivers, the cab companies.
Yeah.
They were just not interested in it. So for us, it was like, okay, so we have, on the one hand, we know the users want it. On the other hand, we can't make it work. So from cabs, we moved on to trying to get other industries. So for example, again, trying to, what could be a different ordering platform is ordering food. So we changed the system a little bit around and said, you know what, let's apply it to restaurants. So instead of picking up the phone and making your order, why not have it through a text message? And we had a bunch of restaurants in Jerusalem come out with a delivery menu, which next to each item there was a number, a letter and a number. So burgers would be A, and then you would have a burger this type A1, a burger this type A2.
And they made a menu just for you.
And then we would post it around and put it in letterboxes all around the neighborhoods, and then people would order through a text message with that, like, I want an A1 to the restaurant they wanted.
Wow, that's very smart.
So we pivoted from cabs to ordering, basically what Uber Eats and all those companies. But again, also that didn't take off. Many different reasons. Delivery systems, the different restaurants that were working, the computer system wasn't working, and we had to make the decision. Eventually it was like, yeah, okay, so we know the users want it, but obviously we didn't call it that way, but the market wasn't there yet.
Yeah.
So at some point it was like, okay, it's not working. Basically it was like, we have a few more things we can check out, although the chances of it succeeding were not that bright. And again, it's a very tough decision. It's like, I don't think there is a rule of thumb, which you can say, okay, with this, obviously...
If this doesn't work, we quit.
Yeah, obviously when things don't work out, they don't work out. And you have to be honest with yourself. Is this something that the market wants? Is this something that people want? But you learn in entrepreneurship that with all the blog posts and all the textbooks and everything that are trying to teach you and giving you these rules and like how things work, it's never like that. It's always gray.
Yeah.
Everything is always gray. And you have to figure it out on your own. So it's like one of the toughest questions. Like,
I always struggle with that. Like, when is it time to stop trying to open a closed door and then find a different door that's already open?
Right. I don't know. It's one of the toughest questions in life. So in Judaism, we have the concept of what we call ishtadlut, of doing your best effort. right? On the one hand, we believe in God, and everything is driven by God. But on the other hand, you as a person, you have to do your best. And if you don't give 110% of yourself, you don't open that door for God's
God
help.
to help you.
That's what we believe in. And then always the question is, that's the balance of life. Okay, so when do I do 110 myself, and when do I say to myself, okay, this is now up for God? You know, it's like there's always the famous joke about the guy who's drowning, the village is drowning, right? And he climbs up to his roof, and somebody,
the helicopter,
exactly, the boat comes by and says, hey, join us, we'll take you. He says, no, I'm waiting for God to help me. And then the boat goes away, and then the water rises, so he goes to the top of his roof, and then this other boat comes by and says, hey, come, we're going to rescue you. And the guy says, no, I'm waiting for God to help me, right? And then the water really comes up, and the helicopter comes and says, hey, we're going to rescue you. He says, no, I'm waiting for God to save me. And then he ends up drowning, and he goes up to heaven, and then he says to, hey, God, why did you save me?
God said, I sent you 2 big boats, you dummy.
And the idea behind the joke is very truthful. Like, so where do I draw the line where I say, okay, I've done enough best effort? But and it really requires very high level of being truthful to yourself, of self-awareness, really being aware of what you're doing. Am I doing more than what I can and what was expected from me? This kind of question of, have I done enough? Should I shut down? Should I pivot? That's where it boils down to. Did I really give my best effort?
Awesome. Okay, so then you pivoted.
Yeah.
And
we pivoted to a bunch of stuff which we tried. We had a whole ad system that we tried running, which didn't take off. But we were in the mobile space, and we knew mobile phones very well. And we knew the mobile operators in Israel, because we were working with these text message systems and the WAP system, the internet. So when the iPhone came out, the App Store came out too, with the ability to create apps for phones. And once the App Store came out, we said it was very obvious that this was going to take off, because it was basically, and any program you want, you can install on your computer. And why shouldn't phones be like that too? And when the App Store came out, it was very obvious, okay, so from having these closed Nokias with the closed operating system where you can't change anything on your phone, suddenly the ability to add apps, it was very clear it wasn't going to take over. It was going to take over. This was going to happen. So we quickly moved into that, and we were one of the first ones to literally develop apps in Israel.
Wow.
Because we were familiar with the systems. We were familiar with the companies. And again, back then, for a year and a half, between 2008 and 2010, a lot of the app purchases were actually made through the markets that were operated by the cellular companies. So Nokia had the OV store. The Nokia back then were the top phone, right? So Nokia had the OV store. BlackBerry had their own store. Apple had the App Store. Android didn't exist yet.
Really? In 2008 it wasn't
No, this is not when it started. Definitely not. I think it came a year later, a year and a half later. And also, for that, before Android, people paid for apps, and paid very well, because it was like buying a computer game.
Yeah.
So a computer game, you'd pay a lot of money. So the same thing for an app. So especially when you went through the cellular systems, through the cellular networks. So in Israel, you had Cellcom, Pelephone, and back then Orange, which is today Partner. So they had their markets, and you would easily buy an app for at least $5-10.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then we had the OV store from Nokia, which we had some. So we started developing apps, and we had some very, very well performing apps on those stores, on Nokia and the other stores which I mentioned. And then Android came out. And when Android came out, the big thing was people for the first few months, people didn't develop specifically apps for Android because it was still small. But what happened was a lot of developers would just knock off apps from the big stores and put them on Android, and put them for free on Android. So then Android became this place, this world where there's free apps, and that affected all the other stores. And then prices started to go down in the other stores too.
And it became less profitable.
Exactly. And then apps landed on the either free or 99 cents per app. But for a year and a half, you made some very nice money off apps, and that's
and you were at the forefront of that.
Yeah, and we were making some very nice revenue, and we managed to build a very nice team, sustainable. Everything was great, And that's what basically we had the idea for creating what ended up being UMoove, the next company. Knowing that it was the N85, that was like the top phone in the market, was the Nokia, which was a touch screen, the first Nokia touchscreen, had a front-facing camera. Very clear that even though the iPhone 1, 2, and 3 did not have a front-facing camera yet, it was clear that the front-facing camera was going to come to the iPhone at some point. And again, we didn't know BlackBerry was going to die, but we thought it was a BlackBerry. It was kind of obvious that they're all going to have front-facing cameras, just like laptops had at the time. So we said, let's use this front-facing camera to track the eye movements. Because if you're holding your phone all the time, and we can track your eye movements, so we can tell a lot of things that are going on either in your mind or on the screen, and so on. So we started developing that. We had the revenue coming in from the apps. We started developing this on the side. And then basically we closed off that company and started working on what ended up being UMoove. UMoove grew, raised money from that, a little bit of money from that from external investors, and built it for a few years, became profitable, thank God, doing some incredible work in the health industry, some very breakthrough tech over there today with mental diagnostic of different mental situations and treating different mental disorders and things like that. Yeah.
And even today, UMoove is still big.
UMoove is a profitable company, thank God. Doing literally life-changing apps.
Life-changing things.
Life-changing things, yeah.
You just decided you could make because you had the idea, you just went ahead and just did it.
So UMoove does eye tracking, and then based on this eye tracking, you have these different projects that you can build.
Mm-hmm. And what was your first project that you built with UMoove?
I don't remember the first, but I'll tell you like some of the magic. Yeah, that was a demo app. But I'll give you an example of something now. So for example, this Mind Reset app. Which is now you can find it on the App Store. Mind Reset. It's incredible. It's a therapist in England that has this incredible technique for dealing with trauma. Using eye tracking, you can create that experience in an app. So basically, this simple app which you can download called Mind Reset, and you can go through the reviews, the feedback we're getting from different researchers which are going on around the world is unbelievable, the way it affects people and changes people's lives. From people who had like a traumatic experience with dogs, again, are afraid of dogs, and then like through a couple of sessions, like that's it, disappears.
That's crazy.
But even through like real like hardcore traumatic experiences that people went through, the app helps them deal with it.
Do you want to speak about how you got 50,000 downloads in under 48 hours, which was near a record back in what?
I don't know if it was a record, but it was definitely impressive.
It was definitely impressive.
Yeah, because there was no like, they didn't have product onto these kind of platforms back then, but it was a mixture of a bunch of things. But as with everything, and we'll probably talk about it later because about going viral and these kind of things, because with ZUtA we've been very fortunate to go viral a bunch of times. There's always the aspect of it that you just can't explain. like we said before, you do your best effort.
But 110%.
110%, 100. It has to be 110%. But then you got to open it up to God. Like some people call it luck, some people will call it God. Definitely not something we expected. It was the first time that it happened, so it was like you stay up all night and you monitor Twitter and Facebook and social media, and you see people posting and talking about it, and you're like getting the adrenaline. Yeah, like people tweeting about, oh, this person just tweeted about it, and then suddenly like this article goes up somewhere. Like suddenly you see this like huge
surge in downloads
from Brazil. Like, oh, what happened? And like suddenly you see that somebody like this big website in Brazil wrote about it, and suddenly you see this surge in somewhere else in the world. It's exciting, but also many times you just can't explain it. And again, I've been through enough times that this has happened to tell you that anyone who tries to explain and tell you that this is exactly what they did and you have to follow these steps is lying. Because there's always this aspect of it which is pure luck.
Can't predict what's going to happen.
Can't predict, and you can't shape it into an actual formula, to-do list. This is what you have to do. It just doesn't work like that. There are plenty of times where we tried to replicate that experience and it didn't work out. We tried to do it again and it didn't work.
With the different apps?
Different apps or companies I've advised and people I've helped, and I said, okay, this is what we did, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You want to do the same thing, and they did the same thing, and flops, nothing.
Do you want to tell everybody a little bit about how you came up with the idea for this incredible new product that you created at ZUtA Labs?
Sure. So ZUtA Labs, the company we've been working on for now almost 9 years, is a robotics company. And the first product we're coming out with is a little robotic printer. Basically, we looked at printers, before printers actually, we looked at the modern day work environment. And we noticed that you are able to do all your work you need from your phone, on the go, wherever you are. Your phone, your laptop, doesn't matter. But you're not constrained anymore to an office. You can go wherever you want, like we're sitting on a coffee place right now, right?
Yeah.
But the only office tool that has yet gone mobile was the printer. Anytime I had to print something, I like, okay, let me just get to my office, I'll print it. Or let me just get home and I'll print it. At the time also, being in college and being a student, many times it was done at the last second. And when I had to hand in the work, I didn't have a printer next to me.
We've been there.
So it was like, okay, how come the printer hasn't gone mobile yet? What's going on? So obviously it can't go mobile because it's a printer. It's like, it has to have the paper go through it.
It's a machine, yeah.
So, and that's where the idea basically came, where why not have the paper sit on the table, and instead of having the paper go through the device and the ink cartridge running left and right, have the cartridge totally free and have it with 4 wheels and let it drive on the paper and print while it moves. And that's how we came up with the idea for this little robotic printer. So this little tiny robot that runs on the paper and prints while it moves. When we started back then, so when I was talking about that this is going to be the first home robot, people didn't really understand what I was talking about. People thought, oh, home robot, Roomba. Right, this little robot that drives around your house. And I was like, no, that's something else. But today, it's a lot easier to understand because the smart speaker industry is basically leading us towards that world where your home is going to be controlled through this one device that sits at home and you interact with it. So based on voice, but not only voice, also other types of interactions. And that's where ZUtA plays. So when you think about smart speakers, again, it's stationary, it's voice-based, and it automates your home, right? Mm-hmm. Anything you tell it to do, it can make your home do. But the next step after that will be to have this little device do more things. So like what? So number 1, print. Number 2, have a little tiny projector in it, have it project. Number 3, have it in a little tiny camera. So if you, in case like you see other companies coming out with these devices that roam their home so that for security,
yeah,
right? So things like that. So that's the future. People call it today home automation, but it's more of home robotics. What ZUtA is aiming to build, a personal robotic device, which is basically this little tiny device everyone will have in their home or with them that will do many, many different things. So starting with printing, obviously speaker, camera, microphone, and so much more.
And you want it all to be into one little
device.
And now for extremely valuable advice for entrepreneurs, I'd love to hear about how you went about raising the money to create this brand new invention that's never been put out into the world before.
So when we started back then, it was a very normal and standard thing to do when you have an idea for a hardware company, especially consumer hardware, is to go to Kickstarter and see and raise the money over there. Kickstarter, still today, but back then even more so, was meant for projects in the making. So we turned to Kickstarter. And we wanted to see how people would react. People would like the idea, would like the concept, and basically over there it just blew up.
And you had a huge goal starting off as well.
So we did a bunch of things which were... So obviously before we went to Kickstarter, I talked to people who had successful Kickstarter campaigns, and they all told me, like, you got to show a product that's already made, and you got to make sure that tell people that you can do it. I was like, hold on a second. It's not ready yet. I'm not going to lie. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to show a product that's already made if it's not made yet. Also, people told me don't set too much of a high goal because that will show that you need money to make it and you want it to. I was like, no, I'm not.
You need a lot of money.
I need a lot of money. It's going to take little did I know that I needed much more than that. We were very clear from day one, especially on Kickstarter, that this is something in the making. And I always say, like, go to our video on Kickstarter and see what we put of it. It was like literally a cartridge with 4 wheels printing 2 lines, 3 lines, and that's it. And it was very clear there was a lot of work still had to be done here. Yeah, so building a consumer hardware product is totally different than anything that's out there. Requires incredible amounts of capital, resources, and doing it as a small startup is really difficult. Again, and as an entrepreneur, you'll be tested like crazy, with crazy things happening, with storms happening, and your job is to navigate. You have one job as an entrepreneur. One job, literally one job. Figure out a way. Whatever happens, figure out a way. You need to hire, figure out the way. You need to bring this, you figure out a way. That's it. That's your one job as an entrepreneur. Uh-huh. Anything happens, figure out a way. That's the one thing. So that's what we've been doing.
Awesome. Apple. And
Right.
you were saying that they needed a lot of iterations to create this new AR headset that they just
Right.
created. Coincidentally, or maybe not so much of a coincidence, the biggest company in the world right now, their co-founder happened to reach out to you. Do you want to speak a little bit about
Right.
how that went down?
Yeah.
How you felt? What was going on?
Okay, so technically, I don't know if I'd call it reach out or not, but basically what happened was, so when we had the Kickstarter campaign, one day I get up in the morning here in Israel and I go through people who backed it throughout the night, and I see the name Steve Wozniak. I was like, okay, that's a no name. Is it really him, or is it somebody using his name? Is there another person with his name in the world? A few hours later, we get an email comes in from some other person. He says, I just backed your Kickstarter, love the idea. So we respond to him, oh, thank you so much, very nice. Like, we responded to all the messages that came in. Thank you very much, very nice. Thank you for supporting us and everything. And by the way, where did you hear about us? The folks on the team were doing that, trying to monitor the news, and people were talking about us and trying to get an understanding where things are happening. So that person replies, oh, I heard about you from an email list Steve Wozniak sends out.
Wow.
And we were like, okay, so it is probably Steve Wozniak who backed us earlier that we saw. So then I said, you know what, Steve Wozniak, I'm not going to miss this opportunity. So we texted him back on the platform saying, hi, Mr. Wozniak, super honored for you supporting us. Would love to chat when you have the time. So he then responded right away, and we got into a conversation. So that was that, email texting through the message texting, whatever, so on. So a few months later, I see on the news that Steve Wozniak is planning to come to Israel for this. Somebody's bringing him for this big event to be introduced, whatever, blah, blah. So I reach out to him saying, hey, Mr. Wozniak, we're in Israel, as you know, and I'd love to meet up. Then I get a message back from him saying he'd actually be super interested in meeting us. He's like, yeah, I know I'm coming to Israel. I'd be more than happy. I really wanted to reach out. I want to meet you guys. And then he wrote to me probably one of the best compliments I could have gotten ever, saying he loves our different thinking, highlighting the words different thinking. And I was like, like getting that compliment from Steve Wozniak, the people who came up with the concept of different thinking, like couldn't ask for a bigger compliment.
That is crazy. Wow.
Yeah, and so he's saying he really wanted to meet up with us, which was amazing. And basically what happened, so when he came to us, he came for like 3 days or 4 days, and we ended up going to his hotel, and I sat with him in the lobby for like 2.5, 3 hours, just talking and hearing stories firsthand from him about the early days of Apple.
And you didn't record it, did you?
So I was there with a friend, Hillel Fuld, who's a known Israeli blogger. He had him interviewed him for a few minutes. You can see that video over there, but it was definitely a different kind of experience. Hearing firsthand from him about Steve Jobs, about the early days of Apple, all the stories, it was definitely amazing. Yeah.
Wow. And how did that affect you? Like being in touch with Steve Wozniak, did it give you a confidence boost knowing that if you have one of the most successful entrepreneurs of all time interested in you, did that give you a motivation to complete your project?
Obviously, like in the entrepreneurship journey, you get knocked down more times than you get pushed up. Let's put it this way, right? You're going to be getting 100 times more no's than a yes. And there's a very, very known piece, I can talk about Judaism, so there's a very known rabbi, and he has a very known piece about honor, or what we call in Hebrew kavod. And he says, many times a person gets an honor that they don't deserve. And they will feel honored for whatever reason, and people will give them the honor even though they don't deserve it, and they feel bad about it. They feel ashamed a little bit about it. Today, maybe you might even call it imposter syndrome or something like that.
Yeah.
Right? And then on the other hand, says Rav Kook, many times though, also, you will be laughed at and you will be disrespected for many times that you don't deserve it either. And says Rav Kook, this is how you should be treating honor and being disrespected. You should put them against each other. Meaning when you're being honored, don't take it too much to heart. Don't get too excited about it. Yet on the other hand, when you're being disrespected, remember the times that you were honored and that people did appreciate you, and use those against each other to keep your life balanced. So on the one hand, get this great honor for someone like Steve Wozniak, right? Undoubtedly this giant. But on the other hand, you have these like nasty comments that, again, from random people, and you say to yourself, you shouldn't care about it. But at the end of the day, it affects, right? We're all human beings. So you got to know how to balance them out. So it's definitely unbelievable and amazing that something like that happened, like a person like Steve Wozniak reaching out and saying that. But on the other hand, also, you know, you have the other side of life. So you gotta stay down to earth. There's still so much to be done, especially with ZUtA. We're like, our roadmap and our plans and our vision is so much greater. So there's still so much work to do. So there's like really nothing to be excited about.
Yeah.
Really nothing to be excited about.
What is one piece of life advice you wish you knew when you were 18 that you either learned the hard way or you think could really help a lot of 18-year-olds around the world?
I don't know, one piece of advice. It's really, really hard.
We can come back to it after if you want.
I just say, I don't know if it's one piece of advice, of this like the number one advice, just like something that's on my mind. Try to learn as much as possible. Always be open to learning. Know where your limits are. Be self-aware. Understand that, again, in Judaism we say, from all my teachers I learned, but from my students I learned the most. It's a very known Jewish saying. So the same thing, like in the world, like you literally, you can learn from everything. Everything is a learning experience. When you take life like that, I believe you would gain and take out of life a lot more than if you don't. If you want to maximize life, make sure you learn from everything. Make sure you turn everything into a learning experience. It will keep you grounded. It will keep you focused. And it will make your life in general much better.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it so much, Tuvia. Wow.
Shkoyach.
That was crazy.
That was